Hi and welcome to Act 4, Scene 3 of Macbeth. I'm going to analyse this for you and talk about it a lot. You may want to watch this twice or keep pausing it and thinking about what I'm saying and making notes because it's a very detailed scene and it's a very long scene. So the first thing that I want you to do is to pause, open up all of the documents and links you need. The link to the scene on Digital Theatre Plus, the scene to read and the document to make notes on during the lesson. It looks like this. So pause now and open up all of those documents so you're ready for the lesson. So let's get going. Here's a little context for you. Macbeth has already been described as a tyrant once, but only once at the end of Act 3. So Shakespeare has begun this idea that Macbeth has become a very, very bad person and that this has been publicly expressed now. He's visited the witches for the second time and got a whole load of new prophecies, which led to him having Macduff's family murdered. It's interesting that we've just witnessed the murder of Macduff's family. Okay. So we've seen it on stage, a bit like we witnessed the murder of Banquo. Now, Macbeth doesn't actually commit any of these murders, he just has someone else do it for him. But we are in a state of shock as Act 4 Scene 2 ends. We've just watched an innocent woman and child being killed. So what I'd like you to do now is pause, follow the link to Digital Theatre Plus to watch Act 4 Scene 3. Welcome back. I'd like you to pause this again and summarise the scene in 20 words. Hi. So today we're going to explore the structure of this scene as well as its place in the play to see how Shakespeare is building tragedy. We need to think about why this scene is here and what happens in it. And this is the big question for today. How does Shakespeare structure this scene to develop the audience's understanding of Macbeth, the character of Macbeth, that is? It's the longest scene in the play, and yet Macbeth doesn't even appear in it. Shakespeare seems to be using it initially to allow his viewer to catch their breath after the horror of the murders of Lady Macduff and her child, before the tension begins to build again. So we have this release of tension because we've watched this awful thing and now there's just two people sat on stage or standing on stage having a chat. But then we know the tension is beginning to build again as we wait for Macduff to find out what has happened to his family. So it gives us time to draw our breath. It slows the pace of the play and allows us time to reflect on what Macbeth has become. Pause now and complete the second box on the handout about why the scene follows the murder of Macduff. Why has Shakespeare done this? So this scene is partially used to explore to develop the character of Macbeth. It's all about him and shows two characters reflecting on what sort of man he is. Remember that playwrights and authors use 4 different methods to create characters. The first is how they look, the second is what they say, the third is what they do, and the fourth is what other characters say about them. And this scene is very clear in that you have two characters, two significant characters, talking about what Macbeth is like. And initially they're talking about his effect on Scotland and what he's done and what a terrible king he is. And then it's followed by a description of his actions and having the Macduffs killed and Macduff's reaction to this. At this moment we can clearly see Macbeth's flaw. We're told about it in the first half of the scene and then we are shown it in the second half with Macduff's response to his loss. So we know that this is a huge flaw that every tragic hero has to have. And it's interesting that he doesn't even appear in this scene. If you look at this pie chart, I have the 4 main characters in the play perhaps. Macbeth has 29% of the lines in the play, whereas Malcolm only has 9% and Macduff has 7%. But the bulk of the lines appear in this scene. And Macbeth, like I say, isn't even there, even though he's really significant. And he's the focus of the scene. The scene itself pivots around contrasts. Perhaps the most significant one is the opposition of good and evil. In this extract that I've got on the screen here, Shakespeare makes it clear that this is a religious divide. He's got the innocent lamb, occurs in the Bible, to appease an angry God. And the angry God is the God of the Old Testament, who's furious and believes in an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, so revenge. This is not a peaceful, peace-loving God who turns the other cheek. This is someone who takes revenge. It's interesting that Macbeth isn't even named in line 1855, just referred to as a tyrant. The highlighted section at the bottom there, the angels are bright still, though the brightest fell, though all things foul would wear the brows of grace, is actually a reference to Satan, to the devil. He began his incarnation as the angel of light, Lucifer, until he challenged God and was cast out of heaven. The connection between Macbeth and the devil would not have been lost on a Jacobean audience. Remember, we've just witnessed the murder of an innocent woman and her children for no reason other than Macbeth is out of control and is a tyrant. Furthermore, Macbeth has taken it upon himself to challenge the notion of kingship and who should be king. So he really is the devil in this instance, being cast out of heaven. I'd like you to pause and make some notes on the good versus evil box. What's really interesting about the contrast between good and evil in the start of the scene is that Malcolm is testing Macduff to see if he can trust him. And to do this, he pretends to be evil. He pretends to be worse than Macbeth and says that when he reveals himself, Black Macbeth will seem pure as snow. So there's still this dichotomy between innocence and guilt and good and evil. And the poor state esteem him as a lamb. So Macbeth is being situated as the innocent here to make Malcolm sound even more evil. There's no, and he says, there is no bottom, none to my voluptuousness. And what he's saying is he's completely worse. He's full of lust, something strangely that Macbeth is never accused of. Malcolm is suggesting that Scotland is much better with the devil they know, Macbeth. Macduff disagrees with him, and through this Malcolm says he can trust Macduff. This discrepancy between appearance and reality runs through the play. Lady Macbeth tells Macbeth to look like the innocent flower but be the serpent under it. So in this moment, Malcolm is doing completely the opposite to Macbeth. He's a good character. He's innocent of any crimes he's been accused of, but he's pretending to be wicked in order to test Macduff. Pause now and make some more notes on Malcolm and Macbeth and the effect of the contrast on the audience. Shakespeare leaves his audience in no doubt about what Macbeth has become. He is a tyrant. It's mentioned 7 times in this scene, tyrant or tyranny. He's fallen from grace. He's no longer an angel, and the downward spiral of a tragic hero is underway. As an audience, we're horrified by what he's become and are waiting to see how he'll be punished. And we know he is going to be punished. Shakespeare uses both foreshadowing and dramatic irony in this scene. First of all, the foreshadowing. The scene begins with a semantic field of grief and pain. We've got desolate, weep, howl, cry, sorrows. Shakespeare introduces the concept of widows and orphans, so the loss of family members, foreshadowing the news that Macduff will receive. And of course, don't forget that we know, the audience know that Macduff's family have been killed, and we're waiting for this revelation. We watch Macduff with both pity and fear, knowing he is about to be given unimaginable news. The tragedy has reached its climax and is unravelling before our eyes. We want Macbeth to be punished at this point. We're completely on the side of Malcolm and Macduff right now. He's done the unforgivable in killing Macduff's family. The second half of the scene moves the action from the political to the personal. We've been told about the way in which Scotland is punished by Macbeth. Now we move on to a personal attack on Macduff. Malcolm sees this as an opportunity to punish Macbeth and get Macduff to act. It's a bit clumsy, but He takes his advantage wherever he can. Macduff, however, needs time to grieve before he takes his revenge on Macbeth. Macduff feels in some way to blame, and remember earlier in this scene Malcolm has questioned why Macduff has left his family, and Macduff has paid the ultimate price for caring about Scotland and abandoning his family. His family have all ended up dead. Shakespeare structures this scene to generate sympathy for Scotland and Macduff and present Macbeth as a tyrant. He moves from the political to the personal. So he moves from what makes a good king to the grief of Macduff to show Macbeth's downfall is total and complete. He has no redeeming features at this moment. The scene begins with grief and ends with fury. And we know from this moment that the rest of the play is going to be everyone taking their revenge upon Macbeth for the sins he's committed. It's almost as if Shakespeare has wound the play up to this moment, piling wicked act upon wicked act upon wicked act until it just all snaps and there is no alternative but to take revenge upon Shakespeare. So I'd like you to pause now and complete the last box on your sheet. Thanks for listening, and be ready for Act 5 when everything becomes very, very personal for Macbeth and he's completely under attack. It's a very fast moving scene, act, unlike the scene that we've just watched, which is slow and ponderous and makes us think about things. Thank you very much. See you soon.